Quick question. Has a relationship ever made your money feel tighter, more anxious, more obligated, or less free? Because optionality isn't just cash, it's who you attach your life to and the agreements you build together. Today, we're talking optionality in relationships, how to choose partners with alignment, set boundaries without becoming cold, and create shared financial freedom in love, business, family, and even your financial planner. Download the Upgrade Your Picker checklist on the website and head to Instagram for more. Let's build clarity that protects peace. What's happening, my optionality builders, my high earners building real purpose on purpose? Welcome back to the Do Different Better show, where we talk wealth, wisdom, and money moves, simple, strategic, and for grown folks only. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, CEO of Connective Institute and Do Different Better, and the managing director of the Integrated Capital Fund. Today's episode is going to feel softer, but obviously more powerful. It's called Upgrading Your Picker, Choosing Partners, Boundaries, and Shared Financial Freedom. This is about creating optionality in your relationships, which includes choosing partners, choosing boundaries, and shared financial freedom. And I want to start with a line that might feel very sharp, but is true. If one relationship can bankrupt your peace, it's not love, it's a contract. It might be a spoken contract, it might be an unspoken contract, it might be a we never discussed it contract. But money and relationships always create terms. The optionality, or the O in my soul framework, is the ability to choose without panic or disruption. Most people think optionality is just cash. It's not. Optionality is also relational because the people you attach to your life can expand your choices or eliminate them altogether. A romantic partner's debt, their spending, or their instability can change your life drastically. I know this firsthand. A business partner's decision making can change your life. I also found this out firsthand. Family expectations can change your life. I also know this one firsthand. Even an advisor, an asset manager, or a financial planner can change your life if you outsource your free choice and free will to someone that is misaligned or has misaligned incentives. So, today I'm going to talk about how to protect your optionality through your relationships without becoming cold, suspicious, or isolated. Now, if you're a naturally isolated person or you're a naturally suspicious person, I'm hoping this will maybe put a container on that, but that's something else you need to work on, okay? But because the goal is not to build necessarily a fortress around yourself, the goal is to build a life with shared freedom for you and your partner, no matter what that kind of partner is. So now let's anchor this in the soul framework, SOLE. And this is why relationships matter. So in the first quarter, I've been talking about the S in the soul framework, which is stability, predictability, buffers, and reduced volatility. We've talked about the baseline, we talked about building your buffer and your brick house. That was your foundation. Now, in the second quarter of the year, we're getting into the O, which is optionality. This is where you begin to see liquidity, flexibility, and your ability to choose. And here's the link to relationships. Relationships can increase volatility or it can reduce it. Relationships can increase your fixed costs or reduce them. Relationships can increase decision fatigue or reduce it. So if you want optionality, you have to be honest about the relational side of your life. Now, let's define what I mean by relational optionality. Relational optionality actually means that you can make decisions inside your relationships without feeling fearful, without feeling judgment. You have boundaries and decision rules that prevent feelings from turning into resentment and a mechanism to have conversations. The other part of relational optionality is you don't have these silent contracts that explode at some unpredictable time. You also can collaborate without feeling like you're losing yourself and putting yourself second or making yourself small. It also means you can share without feeling or being consumed. It's the difference between, hey, we're building something together and I'm slowly being financially absorbed into someone else's chaos. That's not what we want. And because this episode covers multiple types of relationships, here's how I'm going to be talking about it today. First, I'm going to start with defining the concept and identity patterns. You may correlate this with the wealth identity lens. If you haven't taken the wealth identity quiz, go ahead and do that first. Next, I'm going to talk about choosing partners, whether they be romantic or business or financial. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about boundaries and governance and dealing with professionals like asset managers and financial planners. So now let's bring in the wealth identity because this is where people get really predictable. Yourself as well as the other person that you're dealing with. Again, whether this is a personal relationship, a business relationship, or a financial management. First, there are the builders. Builders tend to overfunction. They build these great systems or they cover the gaps and they optimize the household. In relationships, they often become the default financial planner without realizing it. Maybe it's because people perceive that they're better at money because they have more money, or maybe people default to you because you just seem to have more. You're not necessarily better at it than anybody else, but because you assume that responsibility, you take it on. Your strength is that you do provide structure, and that's important. But the risk that you carry is you're carrying everything or you're overbuilding. And as a result, you start to have these low bubbling feelings of resentment that then turn into high bubbling feelings of resentment. Next is the caretaker. Caretakers merge love with rescue. They become the unofficial family CEO. They cover, they support, they stabilize. And they don't necessarily do this well, but they become the person that everyone calls on when they're having any sort of small problem. And because they're known to be able to fix it financially. Now, the caretaker's strength is their generosity. That's amazing. It's lovely. However, their risk is that they erase themselves and they begin to operate from a place of obligation or guilt based yeses. Is that sounding like you? Now, on to my maximizers. Maximizers want the best strategy, the best outcome, the best plan. And in their relationships, they can become controlling or scorekeeping, not because they're bad, but because they fear instability. And they may not have the ability to name actually what's going on. They just know that they got to do. Their strength is their ambition. They want more and they want safety and they want security, and also their ability to create optimization. However, their risk is turning partnerships into a constant performance review, which doesn't feel good for their partner and makes their partner feel like they're always coming up short and perhaps leads to maybe volatile conversations that also don't feel good for either person. Finally, there's the minimalist strategist. The minimalist avoids admin and conflict altogether. They don't want to talk about money until something actually breaks and now it's an emergency for everybody. And maybe not even then. I had a partner like that. They might keep it all inside until it can't be hidden anymore. And there's a letter in the mail or a knock on the door. That's happened to me. And then everything just blows up. Now, the minimalist, their strength is they are looking for something simple. They can't handle something that's overcomplicated or overburdened. But the risk is that their avoidance creates unnecessarily and stressful surprises. And these surprises tend to be expensive, which then kill trust in the relationship. Now, why does this all matter? Because most relationship money problems are actually not about the math. The math is part of it, but the real problem is unspoken expectations, these silent contracts. And these silent contracts may sound like, tell me if you've heard any of these, if I make more, I should pay more. Or if you love me, you'll help. Or if we're a team, then you'll cover me. That's an assumption of an expectation that isn't expressed, right? We don't talk about money because that's not romantic. Another one is we don't need agreements because we just trust each other. Now, I had someone in my Do Different Better Live class workshop that I had in January. And one of the folks that talked about, we'll call her Melissa, she talked about this. Well, I covered this and my husband covers that. And this is the list of the things that I'm responsible for. And these are the things that he's responsible for. And she just realized as a result of the workshop that they never come together to talk about each other's load. So they're carrying the load by themselves. And she was coming from her perspective. If I asked him about what he was managing, it meant that I didn't trust him. And so we're going to be talking about that because it's not what it's about. Trust is a beautiful thing. It's amazing. And you absolutely want to be able to sit in trust. But trust without clarity and transparency is how people get trapped because they don't know what's going on. And then they're surprised and stressed and upset and resentful. Now, here's a powerful truth. Intimacy isn't the absence of boundaries. Intimacy is clarity with care. Okay. The goal of optionality in relationships is not independence. It's interdependence without chaos. And to do that, we need two very important things. The first thing is we need alignment. And the second thing is we need governance. I'm not talking about corporate governance, household governance, relationship governance, business partnership governance. These are all things that are super, super important. And I find so many relationships fail or get into distress, as well as business partnerships fail and get into distress because they didn't want to talk about these things. I remember I was sitting with a couple of entrepreneurs and it was two women. They had been divorced. They had moved in together as a result of their divorce. They were going through divorces at the same time. And they had lived together for a really long time. Their kids had been grown up together. They were practically a new kind of family, right? And when they sat down with me to talk about their business relationship and what the future of the business looked like, it was becoming very, very clear to me that there was misalignment on not only what the future of the company was going to look like. One, it was a mobile, I'm sorry, it was um, they were a health and wellness and fitness team. And they had come up with this new kind of workout. And the one woman was like, I'm getting older. I can't keep hosting these classes. My body's getting tired. My body's getting beat up. I want to move into something else, but I want to stay doing the work that I'm doing. Whereas the other partner, who was a little bit younger than the first partner, wanted to keep doing more classes, more classes. Well, that's a mathematical problem. There are only so many hours in the day, and you can't, unless you're going to astro project yourself, there's no way that you can teach more unless you move into an online environment, which isn't what she wanted. Now, the first partner wanted to move into certifying their program, getting more people who were licensed to execute the program that they had created, which I thought was an amazing thing. And that's actually how you grow and scale the business. And just based on that, it was clear that not only were they not agreement on what the business was, but where the business was going. And so I began to ask them about, do you have a partnership agreement? And they were like, no, we don't need one. We're still lockstep. But clearly they weren't in lockstep. And I said, before we talk about anything else, you really need to sit down and carve out a partnership agreement. What happens? How are you going to grow the business? Who is responsible for what parts of the business? And how will you split the profits of the business? What if this thing goes under? Are you also sharing the responsibility of the liability of whatever is left to pay out? What happens when it's successful? Who owns what? Does the person who came up, did they both come up with this new way of workout? Or is it that one person and they are owning it and they leave the company with it? All of those things are important, particularly in a business situation, but even in a partnership, loving relationship, you all should have these conversations. Now, coming up in the next segment, I'm going to talk about choosing partners and having these conversations that prevent resentment. And if you're already in a relationship, this isn't about fear or name calling or pointing fingers. This is about building a shared operating system that both of you will agree to and subscribe to, because you can't build shared freedom without shared clarity. I will see you after the break. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and today's show is about upgrading your partner picker. So we're having this conversation about choosing partners and having alignment with your optionality. This next part of the show is going to be talking about partner choice and partner alignment. And here's the line that saves people from years of stress. Chemistry is not compatibility, and alignment is compatibility. That's it. You can have chemistry with somebody and it's not necessarily aligned. Again, personal story. When I left my son's father, I loved him dearly, loved him dearly. I thought we were going to spend the rest of our lives together, but it was becoming very clear that we were not on alignment on how we were going to build our financial life. He was very much about spending money. He would go to the ATM like every other day. That's $20 every other day. Can you just imagine? We weren't making a lot of money, by the way. And I remember saying to him, "You are ATMing us to death. You are ATMing us to death." And our goal was that we wanted to buy a car. Neither one of us had a car. And so just think about that, $40 to $60 a week every week. How long would it take us to buy a car had he not been taking out those withdrawals? And so it became very clear that was just one example, but there were many other examples of like, while we had a lot of chemistry, we did not have a compatibility or alignment on how we were going to attain our goals, right? Now we'd had conversations and the conversations that we had were not being backed up by actions. And so unfortunately, I had to say goodbye to that relationship. So first, let's get into romantic partnerships and romantic relationships. Romantic, if you share a life, money is going to touch all parts of that life. It's going to touch housing, the kids, debt, how you support your family or other family members, your lifestyle, your future goals, and the emotional climate of the household, quite frankly, because money touches everything. So if you don't talk about money early, you're not really avoiding conflict. You're only delaying that conflict. And here is the big alignment categories that you want to think about. Number one is, what's the baseline reality? What does each person's baseline look like? What are your fixed costs? What are my fixed costs? What are your debts? What are my debt payments? What are the other obligations? Are there dependents? Do either of you have child support or alimony or some other kinds of payments as a result of before you got together with this person? If one person has a low baseline and the other person has a high baseline, that's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it does require transparency and that you come together with a plan. Number two, money values. Does security matter most? Is it freedom? Is it status? Is it generosity? Or is it simplicity? You've got to know yours as well as have a conversation with the other person about theirs. And if you don't know, you'll fight about spending and you'll call it that you have communication problems. Number three, family support boundaries. This is really important for first gen folks, right? This is also important for those of you who are caretakers. This can be monumental. What is your relationship to your family requests? Do you have a support budget or do you have a rescue rule? Or are you just winging it every time somebody asks you, but you're also known as the person who takes care of everybody else's problems? Maybe you're that person. Maybe your partner is that person. Because family support without governance becomes a silent drain on your combined as well as your individual optionality. Number four, decision rules. Do you have rules? And again, are you or the other person, do you have rules around big purchases? Do you have rules around acquiring new debt or making investments or even recurring subscriptions? How about co-signing? How about giving, right? Some of you are tithers. You give a percentage of your income every month to the place where you worship. Does the other person do that? Do they not do that? Do they do the same amount? Do they do more? What is that amount? If you have some guideposts or rules or agreements, these often tend to reduce arguments. And that's really the name of the game. No one likes to argue, although some like to argue. Lawyers like to argue. But I would say that people lawyers like to argue in a venue. I don't know that they like to argue in their regular life. Tell me if you feel differently. But because you're not deciding in the heat of the emotion, right? That's what these agreements or guideposts or rules, whatever you want to call them, are going to help mitigate these outbursts, these unpredictable outbursts later. Or, I like to call them, emotional, grenades, right? Number five, transparency expectations. Are your accounts shared? Are they separate? Is there a hybrid? Maybe what you're doing is you create one account that all the money goes into, and then what's left over gets into your separate accounts, or vice versa. Your income goes into your individual accounts, and then a portion of that goes into another account that pays your baseline expenses, your baseline fixed costs. You have a conversation about what's private, what's shared. Also, how do you can think about or conceive of mine, yours, and ours, right? Even down to your things, right? What you're bringing into the relationship. When you move into somebody's house, right? Making sure that is this now an our situation and what does that look like? There's no single right answer. Let me be perfectly clear. But there is a wrong answer, and the wrong answer is that there's no answer. Now I'm going to talk about the red flags. Romantic red flags kill optionality. Romantic flags are the avoidance of money conversations. They don't ever want to talk about money, no matter when you bring it up, whether it's scheduled or unscheduled, or whenever you talk about money, even as much as like who's going to cover the cost of dinner or who's going to cover the cost of your next big trip. If those are a problem, that's a red flag. If there's secrecy, any kind of secrecy, they don't want to tell you a thing, that's not necessarily good, right? Constant bailouts and chaos. You're constantly bailing them out or they are constantly bailing out a family member. That is a red flag and cause for conversation, not judgment, but conversation. Any contempt language, when somebody says, "Oh, you're cheap," or "You're irresponsible," mm, that's a flag, meaning that they are bringing judgment to the conversation. Or maybe, is that you? Is that you're the one who's saying that? And you're bringing judgment without any clarity or explanation. Lifestyle expectations that are disconnected from income and cash flow. Maybe they are spending more than they have, right? They're living above their means. Or repeated emergencies that are actually patterns. They're not just a one time emergency, but they seem to be happening every 3 months or every 4 months. Also, another red flag is the refusal to take accountability. These are this is a powerful truth that needs to be brought into the light of day. If you've heard any of these in your relationship, I don't care if you've been together for years or you've been together for months. It is never too late to have these conversations. And before you have these conversations, clearly and squarely identify where do you sit in that conversation. You have to be able to answer all those questions before you go and have a conversation with somebody else about these thoughts or questions. It's not fair to the other person. And quite frankly, it's not fair to you if you have not thought about this before you went and have a conversation with the person. But also, if you really want to be intentional and have a conversation with somebody, say, schedule it. Say, hey, let's go to brunch and I want to talk to you about XYZ. Here are some questions that I have. You can think about these questions and we can talk about them when we have brunch on Sunday. That is also something nice and what I consider kind to do. But you can't build shared wealth with somebody who refuses shared responsibility. Now, let's move on to business partners. So I've got another woman who has come to one of my workshops. She is a realtor. Her and her husband are realtors. And in the workshop, she had shared that while her and her partner, I think this is their second marriage for both of them, they have separate accounts. And he clearly spends a lot more money on clothes. And she is very concerned that he is spending more money than what he actually has, which will have implications because they do have properties that they have purchased together as investment options for themselves, right? So the whole class, the whole workshop, she just kept coming back to like the takeaway that she had at the end of the day was she needed to have a conversation about what was going on with his finances and the possible implications that it might have on their investments that they had together. And I think this is very valuable and important because this happens a lot with women, especially if you are grounded in traditional gender roles where the man takes care of the finances. This, again, is not about not trusting your partner. This is about wanting to have clarity. And one of the things that drove this point home to her was statistically speaking, this is not a judgment. These are facts. The data demonstrates that far more often women will be at the end of their lives by themselves, either through choice or by a separation or divorce or by their partner deceasing, because women live longer than men. Under all three of those circumstances lead to the statistic that women by the end of their lives, and particularly in the last 5 years of their lives, will be alone. So it is important for you to have some sort of line of sight on what is happening financially with your partner. Now, let's talk about business partners and how optionality can become a trap very, very quickly with business partners. A business partnership is literally leverage, but it can also be a liability. So, you need clarity on three very important things. And this goes back to my story about partners. The first one is you need clarity on roles. What does each person own? Who does what? What happens when someone underdelivers? And what I've seen in working with small businesses is 50-50 often means that there's 50-50 ownership, but there's an 80-20 division of the work. And that is how resentment starts. Those two gals that I talked to refused to write this down. They thought that writing this down and putting it in paper was an affront to their friendship. And if that's your mindset, there's nothing anybody can do about that. But I will tell you, the relationship ended badly. Within about 2 to 3 years, their business fell apart. Now, number two, you want to make sure you have a conversation about decision rights. Who can make decisions under what circumstances? Hiring, spending, taking on debt, the strategy, pricing, how clients are accepted, who is accepted. If you don't define your decision rights, you will fight about it during, and it will create stress. And if not underlying stress, stress in the moment. Number three, exit terms. This is the part that people avoid because it feels pessimistic. Like, let's not plan for the business to fall apart. But it's not pessimistic. It's actually protecting the business. You need to know what happens if somebody wants to get out of the business. Life changes. What happens if somebody gets sick? I was going into a partnership with a person who was building a tech platform. I was bringing the strategy and the marketing. They obviously were building. They had the tech and all of the intellectual knowledge that was needed to launch this thing. Now, this person had a very severe diabetic issue. And so we wrote into our agreement what was going to look like if she were to go into a diabetic coma, if she were to experience some severe diabetic related injury or something happened to her as a result. And so we put in our contract who in her family would take over her decision making, or that decisions would be deferred to me until a representative with the appropriate knowledge could be selected. But you want to talk about what happens if someone is stops performing or unable. How will buyouts work? Whether one person gets a divorce, right? You don't see that coming, but they're getting divorced. And so they need to be bought out, or you want to buy somebody out because they're acting a little nutty, right? What happens if personal relationships change, right? Your personal relationship with this person. Having no exit plans means that the partnership can actually trap you. Now I'm going to talk about family relationships because they are the biggest optionality stressor for high capacity and high earning people, right? In families, money is rarely just money. It's identity, it's loyalty, it's duty. Sometimes it's repair, and sometimes it's history, and sometimes it's all of those things. So, optionality in family relationship often depends on one thing, that there needs to be a support budget, a rescue rule, and a cadence. A support budget is how you help on purpose. It's a determined amount of money that is specifically for help. Your rescue rule, what are the things that you don't fund, right? And the cadence, when you decide, so you don't decide under pressure. That's how you stay connected without becoming the family's financial infrastructure, right? Now, coming up is where I'm going to help you install a shared optionality operating system. These are the rules, the cadence, and how to work with financial professionals without outsourcing your agency. Now, if you're enjoying the show, please take a look watch us on YouTube, but you can also follow me on Instagram at Do Better with Elaine. I'm gonna see you right after the break. You are listening to the Do Different Better show, and I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Today, we have been talking about optionality in your relationships, upgrading your picker. So, we have been talking about creating optionality in all your relationships, whether it be romantic relationships, business partners, or otherwise. So, now I'm going to discuss the governance. This is the structure that keeps relationships from becoming financial chaos. And here's the anchor for this conversation. Optionality is protected by governance. This is a core belief that we have to go forward with the rest of this conversation. Optionality is protected by governance. However you want to call them, you want to call them rules, you want to call them agreements, whatever word you want to insert there, but it is creating some kind of structure at home, in business, and in wealth management. So let's get started with the shared operating system. Your shared optionality operating system, you're going to need three things. First, you're going to need shared definitions. Two, you're going to need shared rules. And finally, three, you're going to need a shared cadence. So I'm going to break all of those down. First, shared definitions. Here is where you define what counts as your baseline expenses, what counts as an emergency, what counts as a big decision, what counts as an acceptable level of debt, and how you handle family support, right? Because half of conflict is because people are using the same word, but those words mean different things to each person. Number two, shared rules. Here are core rules that protect optionality, and feel free to create your own or modify. There's the one in, one out rule. This is for new recurring obligations. If you add a monthly payment, you have to remove one, either by paying it off or whatever the case may be. But one in, one out. This protects your flexibility and maintains your baseline. 24-hour rule for big purchases or major money decisions. This gives you an opportunity to cool your emotions. The adrenaline that's running in your body gives that a chance to and the dopamine that's running in your body gives that a chance to dissipate, right? And that's when your clarity begins to rise. No co-signing rule. This is great for many households. Co-signing is often a relationship grenade. I also found that out firsthand through my relationship. I went to co-sign for my son's car and not realizing that it was going to upset my partner by putting us on the hook for my son's car. But everything turned out fine. My son ended up paying off the car. There was no negative impact, but it was an example of how I didn't realize that was something that was important to them. Finally, the money cadence rule. That means a weekly 7 to 15-minute money huddle, a monthly close, and a quarterly review. These rules reduce decision fatigue and growing resentment. So for me, with my partner, I have a monthly summit, and we call this our financial summit. Actually, we meet every weekend on Sundays, and every weekend has a different theme topic. And so we might be talking about our health one week. The next week, we're talking about our finances. The next week, we're talking about our relationship. And the last week, we're talking about like anything else that's come up, right? It's just a time we have on the calendar. Sometimes we have things to talk about, sometimes we don't, but it's just a quick check-in, make sure that we're all on the same page and there's transparency, and it's an opportunity also to ask questions at that time. Now, we're also mentally prepared for the conversation, right? We don't necessarily have an agenda, although sometimes we do, but it's once again a dedicated time where we can discuss those. We can have our emotions in check because we know it's coming. We can deal with our emotions before we get to the conversation so that our conversation doesn't blow up. Number three, the shared cadence. Cadence is how you avoid arguing in the moment, which is what I was just talking about. A 10-minute weekly huddle can cover what is the status of things. Are we safe? Are we tight? Or is there a red alert? You get to talk about any upcoming bills, particularly unplanned bills. You can talk about, is there one priority that you have for the week or for the month or for the quarter, as well as a boundary that you would like to set, or how things are going with a boundary you've already set. And then the monthly close or summit or meeting or brunch, whatever you want to call it, can talk about any transfers that have happened, any savings that have happened or hasn't happened, any investing that's happened or hasn't happened, or even just checking on it, what's happening with these particular things. But also, if there are bigger topics that need to be dealt with, this is a good time to deal with them. And then the quarterly review is when you handle looking at how are we tracking to our goals. Let's talk about a debt strategy, right? Let's get rid of some of this debt and how can we address it. Or are we going to be running into problems? This is where you can talk about insurance, you can talk about big purchases, and you can talk about family support patterns. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? Do you want to create an agreement around something that is a new occurring incident that you're observing? Now, because governance without language is just a theory, I'm going to give you some scripts that you can use. And again, I want you to practice these before you go out and start using them so that you can really start to feel what feels comfortable for you, what feels natural to you, what language, or if you want to tweak the language. This is not perfect by any means, but I want to give you at least some examples that are really meant to preserve trust. So I want you to think about maybe writing these down in your money journal as scripts that you could possibly use with your partner. Number one, I want us aligned and not surprised. Number two, let's decide the rules now so that we don't fight later. Number three, I'm comfortable with X, but I'm not comfortable with Y. Next one, we can talk about the goal, but we need a plan for the cost. Another one, I can support outcomes, but not patterns. And finally, I'm not saying no forever. I'm just saying no because I don't see that we have a plan. All of these are short, clear, non defensive. If you're feeling like these are words that name a feeling that you've had but haven't expressed, then I want you to practice any or all of these before you have a conversation with your partner. Now, as we kind of wrap up here, we're going to talk about professionals. I'm going to be talking about asset managers and financial planners. Okay. Optionality with financial planners is not is you want to delegate without losing your agency. A financial planner or an asset manager can increase your optionality by reducing some of your complexity, creating an investment policy statement, setting decision rules or helping you set decision rules, keeping you from doing emotional trading, but organizing a tax strategy and coordinating insurance and estate basics. Because they can also reduce optionality if you outsource your thinking to someone but they can also reduce optionality if you outsource your thinking to someone that is misaligned, right? Hence the theme. Here's how to choose them without losing yourself. So, one, you've got to clarify what the incentives. Possibly prefer a fee only fiduciary when that's possible. The way that you do this is you've got to ask, how are you compensated? I know so many wealthy people that I've worked with who don't know how their advisors or their wealth managers are paid. I'm stunned. I am constantly stunned at super uber wealthy people who don't know how their financial planner, and it's particularly women who don't know how their financial or wealth advisor is paid. And there's a variety of different ways that they can get paid. I think I've got 2 episodes on this. So you can just do a search and find those episodes. But if you don't understand how they get paid, then you should not continue to proceed with a conversation with them. Number two, define a scope of work. Define what you're actually hiring them to do. Do you want an investment manager? Do you just want some estate planning? Do you want tax coordination or behavior coaching? Know what you're buying. I want you, number three is ask for governance tools. There are things that they can help you with, like creating an investment policy statement. I know that we've created one on another episode, but you could, if you've already created one, present that to them. Talk to them about rebalancing some of the rules that you've set, creating a communication cadence, and identifying what triggers change and what doesn't change. This is your decision optionality built into your financial life. And number four, finally, I want you to watch for red flags. Even with an advisor, there can be red flags. I want you to be mindful. Are you getting a lot of fear-based selling? I know my partner, when I first met her financial advisor, that used to tick me off. It was a lot of fear-based decision making, which I do not subscribe to. Also, secrecy or trust me without clarity. I had some friends of mine, a number of friends of mine, a gentleman who I had met and had brought into some of the came in to speak to some of the events that I did, he ended up taking these women for millions, and they were all women. He's now in prison, but there has not been any restitution. He wiped out these women's full on plans. Now, these women were feeling suspicious, but because they didn't want to have the conversations, even though they were feeling suspicious, they ended up being to all their money, their entire savings. These are women now in their 50s. And so their whole life savings has been wiped out, right? If the wealth advisor starts giving you complex strategies without purpose or able to clearly define, um, they're pushing products before getting you to understand the goal of those products, or they're reluctant to define any decision making rules or how they're going to be moving your money or working with your money or working with you. These are all red flags. And here's the powerful truth: you can delegate tasks without delegating your agency. Now, let's close with a simple action list. You know, I'm always like to be tactical and practical. I want you to walk away with something that you can do this week. So here are this week's action steps if this is the thing that you want to concentrate on today. Number 1, I want you to identify the biggest relationship optionality risk. Is it in your personal relationship? Is it in your business? Is it in your family? Or is it with your advisor? Number 2, I want you to pick 2 rules to put into place this month. Could be the 1 in, 1 out, could be a 24-hour rule, could be the money huddle cadence, it could be that you're not co-signing on anything, or it could be the family support budget. And I want to go back to the no co-signing. Maybe it's also like getting out of the co-signing that you're already in. Okay. Number 3, you're going to download the upgrade your picker relationship optionality checklist from the website at www.dodifferentbetter.com and go to the website for the scripts and other examples, because optionality is not just cash. It's who you attach your life to and the agreements you build together. Relationships can be a wealth accelerator or an optionality killer. I want you to choose alignment, build governance, protect shared freedom. Turn your income into optionality so that you can do different better. Don't forget to check us out on the website, www.dodifferentbetter.com. You can also DM me on Instagram. Tell me what's resonating for you, what's landing, what's your biggest question that you have. I'd love to try to answer it for you and talk about it on the show. Make sure that you're telling me what's working and what's not working. Don't forget, you can take the wealth identity quiz on the website. Find out where are you landing. So then when we're talking about solutions, you know what's the optimal solution for you to move your wealth journey forward. Thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to see you next week. You're listening to the Do Different Better Show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Can't wait to see you next week when we do different better.